things that these people that they're dealing with are dealing with in terms of trauma or stress, and then they try to step up, like this story kind of.
We didn't get to mention it in the story last night for time purposes, but as you heard there in the story, when they found the car seat for this woman, the officers found it very important to be able to take the car seat there with them. They also took, in addition to the car seat, a trunk full of bats and balls and all kinds of stuff to play with. And
awesome.
to take to these kids that are at the home, because there were not just the child that was not in the car seat, there was other children in the home, and they took a whole bunch of stuff and just spent some time after they dropped off the car seat playing with these kids in the front yard.
That is so awesome.
And the officer told me that a man who lives in the neighborhood where this happened was walking by and just stopped to watch him for a little while. And he said he watched for a few minutes and didn't say anything, and kind of gave him, whenever he went to leave, he got the officer's attention and kind of gave him a little salute, like, this is what you're supposed to be doing. That's incredible that you're doing your job. Keep doing it this way. And off he went. And he just stopped and watched him play for a little while. But, the Tori said in the interview, the social worker said in the interview, she said it was so fun to watch the kids and listen to the kids, because one of the kids said, I've never played soccer with a cop before. So it was pretty cool to be around then and to listen to how happy they were to have been able to do that. So we're joined on the phone today by Gina English, who's the social services coordinator for KCPD on the KCMO side. Gina, thanks so much for taking some time out of your schedule and talking to us today. We appreciate you being on.
Thank you for including me.
So we're talking about this story that aired last night on 41 Action News that I had the opportunity to do about the social workers embedded within KCPD. Tell me a little bit more about, for the people especially that didn't see the story, because I didn't get to touch on this a whole lot, about the history of how did this come to be that there's a social worker within all 6 divisions of KCPD?
It originally started December in 2016 as a 9-month pilot program. But between myself and Major Rick Smith at the time, he was Major at Center Patrol. Now he is the chief of for KCPD. And really, it was he and I had worked in another program together, utilizing social services as intervention for violence prevention. And he had moved to Center, and I was no longer with that organization. He reached out and he said, hey, let's see if we can maybe do a 9-month, or not a 9-month, but a pilot program. We ended up getting funding for 9 months and using social services as a prevention piece to crime. And at first it started kind of primarily it was a youth focus, but when I first came in, I really just wanted to pay attention and listen and see where the officers believed that the need was and support the work that they were doing. And so that's where it has kind of grown, in that we still have a youth focus, but our focus is a community focus. And that when officers are out there and they come across, something that they believe is a need, they have this tool in-house to go to and say, hey, this person needs help. Because the reality is the majority of the things that officers find themselves, dealing with on a daily basis are not all, law enforcement issues or criminal, issues.
Crime-related,
It's people who just need help. I mean, that's what we know, right? You need help. What do? You call police. And so this is a way for officers to really be able to answer that need for help outside of, what law enforcement tools are available. And for me, the biggest thing is, and I think the same is true for, for Chief when we first started this, is recognizing how much we need to be able to have trust in the community that we are working together, and that, law enforcement, we do call them when we need help, but unfortunately, it's in some of our worst, scariest moments.
So, Gina,
yes, go ahead.
I was going to say, obviously, there's a relationship between police department and social services before this program. What did it look like before something like this is implemented? Because right now, as we were saying, there's a social worker in the building in each of the divisions for KCPD, right there embedded with the department. What did it look like whenever a law enforcement officer, KCPD officer, needed to talk to social services or someone with social services before this was implemented?
It looked like, it didn't exist. because, I mean, there's such a huge variety of needs. And just to say social services, I mean, that can be so many different things. Social services and working with family court, social services and working with, someone, an agency like MOXA for sexual assault, social services for, maybe somebody, an elderly person. I mean, that is huge. I mean, to be able to define that and say, what did that look like? It looked like whatever that knowledge for that specific concern was, for that officer. And if that officer goes out and they may not know about what's available in the community, or they may not know what the right social service agency is, then, they are going to have to work hard to try to figure out what that is, amongst also having 10 other calls waiting for them.
So it ups without this person in the building, it ups the responsibility of the officer. If that officer wants to be able to help someone at all, it puts a lot more onus on them to be able to do anything if they want to get some help.
I don't think it's not a matter of it ups the responsibility for the officer. It ups the accessibility for the officer to be able to already do what they want to do, and that is serve and help people. I mean, that's it, is being able to do that and know that. And I think the thing for me that is so extremely important is that we do have that trust building piece, and that's great because people see officers, in their mind going over and beyond to help them out. But the reality is officers are always going over and beyond. People just don't recognize it or see it all the time. But the real piece for me that I think is exciting, and it even was in Tori's story when she talked about, when she got the car seat and the officers were excited because they wanted to go with her to take it, is that they finally get to see those pieces of the resolution. Imagine going out every day and you're answering call after call, and how frustrating it could be that sometimes when you are walking away, you feel like, well, I don't know if I really was able to help that person. I don't know if that person is going to be able to get connected to what they need. And so the idea that now they have this tool that not only can ensure that those things are happening, but that they get to be a part of the good side, so that when they come back into the situation, that it's not in the scariest and most chaotic part of the person's life, but it's in the resolution part of the person's life.
Well, I always say when building or mending any relationship, you need what's called the 3 T's. You need time, transparency, and trust. And I feel as if
Amen.
programs like this help establish that trust, especially. And, in order to get to that trust component, I have to know you and like you to trust you. I mean, I feel as if you and I trust each other now, Gina. It's because we know each other. And I like you. I hope you like me too. But no pressure. No pressure. But in all seriousness, the time, transparency, and trust builds those relationships. If every time I see the men and women in blue, it's something that I associate with agony or with fear or with frustration, then I won't even care to know these resources are out there. But if I am building those relationships beyond those blue lights, beyond the crime scene tape, I feel as if people can take advantage of these programs, and more importantly, they want to, because they just don't associate the men and women with blue with bad things.
No, well, and I appreciate what you're saying, and that really is what it's all about, right? I mean, we have some communities that are just weighed down by violence and crime, and the only way to be able to combat it is to know that you're not doing it alone, and that you have a community behind you that's helping you stand up for it. But it's hard to do that if you don't feel like you can trust the people that that are there to help you. And I really appreciate what you said, Kevin, and that the things that you associate police with. It makes sense that a lot of people associate police with that, because when do you come in contact with them? Nobody ever calls an officer and says, hey, I'm just calling to ask you to come over because I'm having an awesome day.
Right.
And so if we can start to be if we can be one small tool that officers can have to be able to have opportunities to celebrate the citizens that they serve and vice versa, then to develop and starts to build, and that's what's going to start to be able to address the violence and the crime in our communities, when you know that you can call someone and they're going to show up and have your back, because when you least expected them to, they did.
Hey, Gina, it's Sam. In terms of the program itself, was there a model that you guys kind of said, hey, we'd like to bring that here, or did you kind of create it from scratch? And then conversely,
Go ahead.
Are there, since you guys have, this is going into year 3 now of the program, have there been other departments that have reached out to you and say, hey, clearly what you guys are doing is working. Can you help us bring this kind of a program to our department?
So I did a lot of research when she reached out to me about, developing a pilot, kind of project. I did a lot of research. No, there's no one who's actually really doing it like we are. And like I said, when we first started, it was somewhat youth-focused and really has become what it is organically because of the officers. This would not work if the officers did not have buy-in to it. They are invested in it because it's for them. It's about them. It's driven by them. There are other agencies within the nation that do use a social service component, but it is typically population specific. Like, for instance, the program that I had come from was focused strictly on group violence. So there was a social service element, but it was strictly group violence. A lot of times there's a social service component, but they act as a liaison to another organization. So, our CIT has great relationships with different mental health providers throughout the community, and there is a social worker component to it, but it's specific to mental health. And so the way that we're doing it, no, there's no other agency that I know of that is really doing it like us. I've had 2 or 3 different organizations throughout the country reach out to me and just say, hey, I saw a blurb about this. I was Googling social work and police, and could you please tell me more? I would love to do something like this, within our city.
I was struck by something that Tori said in the story last night about she had no idea that how much police officers were already trying to do this. And to me, it was something that obviously the police officers have talked about how much different and better their job is by having a social worker or a social services person right there in the building they can coordinate with. But it feels like it's an eye-opening experience for the social workers that are working with these officers too, to be able to understand more how those two jobs kind of can intertwine to really make a difference. It seems like it's eye-opening for both sides, not just the police officer.
100%. As a social worker, we as social workers, we are advocates for, social justice. We advocate for, having equitable, access to the things needed to be successful. And, but these are also very hard jobs, and that you are typically helping populations that are struggling. And I always we take interns, and I always tell students, you got to find your people. This is a hard job, so you got to find the people that you want to fight for and advocate for and serve and be passionate about it, because this is a hard job. And I will tell you, I never ever thought that police would be my people, but they are. They're my people, because my time, it was Nova was who I was originally with under, at the time, Major Smith. And the things that I would see these officers do for individuals who had been identified as the most high risk for violence in their lives because of their behaviors. And these officers would go over and beyond to support individuals to try to get back on track. And I just remember thinking, man, who's advocating for them? Here I am watching them advocate for the last person you would think that they'd advocate for. Who's advocating for them?
Well, I certainly think with you being the addition to the KCPD, it really reinforces the serve component in serve and protect. Oftentimes we forget about, that part right there. We just think about them protecting us. To some of our people who may be listening, Gina, though, and many of them, they may want to help financially. As Taylor's story highlighted, I mean, car seats aren't cheap.
Right.
To the folks listening, how can they reach out and offer assistance?
That is a great question. And I will tell you that, we are always needing support and assistance. And I really am a true believer in that it takes a community. I always say #VillageKC. We're one city. And that, if people want to get involved and engaged, and that, being able to, we had a woman last week, I think, or 2 weeks ago, called into the station and said, hey, I just wanted to let you know that I'm willing, that if you come across any families who are struggling with homelessness and just need somewhere to stay for the night, I'm willing to help assist in providing funding for a hotel.
That's a big help.
And I was like, wow, thank you. Because sometimes that's all we need. We just need sometimes one night to try to figure out, a more long-term plan.
Because you guys, I'm sorry, you guys run off grants and donations, correct?
Pretty much, yeah. Yes. And we are always looking for different ways for people to just, get involved.
Does Gina and Sam, does KCPD have an infrastructure, and this kind of reminds me, one of our reporters did a story a couple of months ago about a program where people were donating sheets to sexual violence survivors.
Marissa Smith, crime tech Marissa Smith.
And I think they had just found like an empty closet or something like that somewhere in KCPD. And it's like, does KCPD have the infrastructure in terms of, if I am a person that wants to donate a car seat, for instance, do I just drop that off at the station? Like, is there a bank account? Like, if I go to Commerce Bank or wherever, that I do that, and the infrastructure's there to make sure that goes to where it needs to go? Because I think that could, if not, that could also be a component of how the community can help out these types of projects.
That, as far as like items like, a car seat or like clothing, those are things that they can email me, and I can provide that information, or, especially if it's like brand new items, like school supplies, things like that, they can go to the division and say, hey, I'd like to, give these items to social services to assist people in the community. As far as financial donations, that is, we don't necessarily have like an infrastructure as social services, but if they were wanting to make a financial donation, again, that's something, if they wanted to email me, we figure out the best way for them to be able to donate money to the cause, possibly through maybe like the Police Foundation, to be able to go back into the community for the family or someone in need.
I guess maybe a follow-up, and Kevin, you may be just as well versed on this in the breadth of your Safe KC coverage. Gina, how does this program fit into the broader scope of resources that are available that fit the same mission as what you guys are trying to do?
Well, I think the thing is that really what we're trying to do is help connect people to other people's missions. That's really because we're not necessarily a program. We don't have the answers. People aren't going to come into the agency and then all of a sudden we're like, okay, and we're going to, do 3 months of case management and get you to self-sufficiency. The thing with Kansas City, and again, going back to that #VillageKC, this city is full of amazing organizations and agencies that are out there doing awesome work. And what our job is that, officers are meeting people when they need those organizations and agencies the most. And they're able to come to us and say, this is what this person needs. And then we get them connected to those agencies. We talk about like gaps in services. We talk about how people fall through the cracks. Well, what our job is we're, I used to say it was that we were like kind of the safety net, but we don't want to be the safety net. What we want to be is more like the needle and thread that sews the fabric together. We want to be the ones who are able to, travel with someone and figuring out, okay, what are your needs? What are your obstacles? But what are your strengths? Because you have a lot of them. And what are the resources that are actually right at your fingertips, but you just didn't either know about them or you didn't know how to make them work for you. And we help them build that army of support around them. I mean, that's why we get where we get in some of the communities, is that when you are lacking the right supports and really just social network,